Welcome to another edition of the Corner Booth Podcast here from the Snowdon Deli. I'm Aaron Rand from CJD, along with Bill Brownstein of the Montreal Gazette, and our special guest today, Fred Beauchemin, Liberal MNA, who, beyond being a Liberal MNA, is now one of the 5 confirmed candidates to run for the leadership of the Provincial Liberal Party. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
So before we begin, full transparency, you and I know each other from many, many years ago, but that will not affect what we discuss today.
How so?
Hopefully not.
We met in a gym and we worked in the same gym.
Okay, we won't go there.
And he's in much better shape than I am. All right. Listen, we have, obviously this has been a big week, and it's rather auspicious that you're here on this day, one day after the newest entry into the race, and that's Pablo Rodriguez. So I want to start by first asking a question which may seem kind of ridiculous, but there are a lot of people that think he will, as the first real name beyond Deli, who was the first to jump in, he will make a difference here in a positive way for the party overall. Never mind if he becomes leader or not. Is that fair?
Well, the popularity is an aspect, and obviously he brings with his popularity name recognition that people will be willing to pay more attention to the Liberal Party of Quebec just because of that. But at the end of the day, it is not a debate about popularity. It's more a debate of ideas. And what I think is going to be good about this is that within the Liberal Party of Quebec, that debate of idea is actually going to be coming with five people having their own ideas, and that's going to be very good for the future of Quebec.
He has already taken shots, which is to be expected, right? The opposition has called him out, or the government has called him out, saying, here's another federal, Liberal not minding his own business, sticking his nose into Quebec politics. He made the decision, though, and I'm curious what you think, to sit as an independent and not to remain as a Liberal. Never mind the ministry which he's giving up. What do you think of that idea?
I think he had no choice. It would have been weird to stay within the Liberal caucus in Ottawa and then at the same time run for the leadership of the Liberal Party of Quebec. The fact that he remains an independent is simply because of the concept of having to call a by-election in advance, and so he's doing the right thing in terms of saving Canadian taxpayers money.
Is there a suspicion when, even though you're both in name Liberals, when someone is a federal Liberal and someone is a provincial Liberal?
I'm glad you bring up that question.
Because I'm guessing that there might be a problem to some people on certain levels.
The Liberal Party of Quebec is not a branch of the Liberal Party of Canada. There's no doubt about that.
Although in everybody's minds,
the association is just because the word liberal is in both. But at the end of the day, there's definitely a different set of ways of doing things within the Liberal Party of Quebec as opposed to the Liberal Party of Canada. We're the government of Quebec and the Liberal Party of Quebec is more grassroots. It's more enshrined in being closer to the citizens as opposed to Ottawa, where it's more sort of high-level type of policies. And there's huge differences in ways to approach serving the people in both parties. So, it's definitely two different things.
But in terms of, your acceptance or the Liberal Party of Quebec's acceptance of Mr. Rodriguez, is that going to be a problem? Because, I think you would think, and a lot of others, that you have different values when it comes to immigration for one, and a lot of other levels as well.
We welcome everybody within the Liberal Party of Quebec to participate in this race. There's no doubt in my mind about that. Although, Pablo's track record is the Government of Canada's track record, which is higher taxes for everybody, no view in terms of economic development, no real proper management of public finances. They've just been spending like drunken sailors, as the CAQ government has done over the last 5-6 years and beyond for the Liberal Party.
So that's not much of an endorsement so far.
But I'm just trying to make the differential between the two candidacies, and we have field of competencies, and that relates to your question. There's field of competencies within Quebec that are just Quebec owned as opposed to Ottawa's.
Right.
And so what we have seen from the Liberal Party of Canada is this invasion of these competencies, which has just created, arguments for no good reason, just because the Liberal in Ottawa are trying to, win votes by offering programs that are already being offered by the Quebec government. And so what should have been done is providing the Quebec government or all provinces government more money to execute these programs, which are within their own competencies, more leverage to execute those programs properly, as opposed to competing for the same objective.
Do you think that name recognition will trump what you're just bringing up? In other words, like when he comes to Quebec, the Liberal Party, that they'll think, well, this is a star, and no matter that his values, his ideas are different than ours.
At the end of the day, it's the members of the Liberal Party of Quebec that are going to execute their vote. They're going to cast their ballot and choose the next leader of the Liberal Party of Quebec and hopefully the next leader of Quebec. So it is within that midst that we're going to actually have that debate. Popularity is going to, attract the cameras, attract the media, and so forth. But within the membership of the Liberal Party of Quebec, it's definitely going to be about the ideas. There's no doubt in my mind about that. And, that's just going to end up being... And I'll take the opportunity right now to invite everybody to bring, to buy a membership card. It's $5. Buy a membership card for the Liberal Party of Quebec because it will give you the right to vote for the next leader and will give you the right to actually maybe choose the next Prime Minister of Quebec. So it's not that expensive, and it gets you involved within the political process. It gets you involved with the Liberal Party of Quebec. It's $5, and you have a say in the next move going forward. So do it.
All right, we talked around the issue. Let's talk about you. You're talking about, Bill brings up, people's popularity. Most Quebecers probably don't know you, don't really know your background. So let's talk a little bit about that. You're the finance guy. Your career has been in finance. You already have an endorsement from Carlos Leitao, the former finance minister, which is obviously positive. So who are you? What should people know about you? And why did you decide to run?
I've decided to run because I don't think the direction that Quebec is going right now is the right direction. I come from a generation, and we've known each other for a while, but I come from that generation where, we used to live together without having these battles. I used to listen to Shom as a kid. I used to actually, Shom FM. I used to listen to Shom. I used to hang out with Anglophones, Italians. It doesn't matter who they were from. We used to go to the same schools or not, but we used to hang at the park together. This was fun. This is the Quebec that I think, should be represented right now in our society. I think that CAQ is taking us in a wrong direction. They have no view in terms of economic development. They have no view in terms of developing the regions. So that's what is motivating me in jumping into that. I come from the South Shore of St. Lambert, South Shore of Montreal, in St. Lambert, just across the Victoria Bridge. I had 3 sisters. I graduated from HSC. I have 2 kids. Spent a career in capital markets. I used to run the desk. I used to run the business for the Bank of Nova Scotia here in Montreal after being in Toronto for a while and so forth. But and my view is that we need to align the priorities of Quebec within the Liberal Party of Quebec, which means our economy needs to be the economy of the future of intellectual property. We need to actually have an economy of the future with more intellectual property per capita, ownership economy as opposed to a branch economy. That's the view in terms of where the economy should be going. Regional development, I talked about it. It's significant because Quebec has 17 economic regions. Quebec is like a train that's pulling 17 wagons. If one wagon is not moving forward, if one region is not moving forward, the train's not moving forward. So we need to develop every part of Quebec to its capacity, to each and every one's capacity. And the basis for all of this is sustainable and well-managed public finances. And there's 2 aspects to that. There's the spending part, which the CAQ has been a drunken sailor at doing that, augmenting our spend by 60% since they took office, which is crazy. It's the worst jurisdiction in all of North America, the way that these guys are managing our money. And then obviously the revenue side, which is how do we grow the pie? How do we make Quebec bigger in terms of its footprint in the global economy? How do we grow the mentality? So that's the economy of intellectual property, knowledge-based economy, make sure we develop all of our resources.
That's interesting because you're dealing with, and I think even the average citizen realizes running an $11 billion deficit
Huge.
Is obviously not a good thing. Yeah. This government now is focusing to talk about what we should be focusing on in the future. So take Northvolt as an example, and all the money being spent there to develop that for a technology that, who knows, in 5-10 years may have not been the best bet necessarily. Yeah. You talk about intellectual property, so where would that money be spent as far as you're concerned? Should it be spent?
Well, we have 262,000 small and medium-sized businesses across all of Quebec, across all of these 17 economic regions that I talk about. If you take the example of Northvolt, they're being given $7 billion of subsidies, both in Ottawa and Quebec City, to basically assemble batteries. There's no intellectual property there at all. A. B. If you think about it from an analogy, like Nordvolt is the tree that's hiding the forest. Behind Nordvolt, behind that tree, are all of these businesses that are ours. So what they're looking for is a way to distribute their products, is a way to distribute what they're selling to the world. And so right now with Nordvolt, they're kind of focused in being given no choice but to go towards Nordvolt, while they could be actually giving their products to other places in the world. So that's the objective. What we should have been doing is actually helping our own businesses. I'm not against having international investment coming into Canada and into Quebec. That's important as well. We need to have a diversified economy for sure. But we have taxed our 262,000 small and medium-sized businesses. We have taxed Quebecers to just tremendous amount of taxes. But yet we're taking all those dollars and we're giving it to a startup from Sweden, which if it ever makes money one day, the famous value add that Legault's been babbling about as it relates to Nordvolt, those profits are going to Sweden. They're not staying here in Quebec. So I mean, for me, it's like a model that dates back to the 90s when we actually had 12% unemployment rate, and what we needed to do is to create jobs. We don't need to create jobs. We have a short labor shortage here in Quebec right now. So because of that situation, that business development model is not smart. What we need to do is we need to figure ways to help the next Couche-Tard who's somewhere in one region, or the next CGI, which is somewhere in the next region of Quebec, to flourish. And therefore we should think about helping our businesses first before subsidizing. And we're hurting our small businesses because we're taxing them and we're giving that money, and we're taking the employees from the small businesses, and they're going to go and work for Nordvolt. Like, we're shooting ourselves in the foot.
You alluded earlier to a divisiveness that, like, you grew up in a very happy environment with happy to get along with everybody. That's changed. And as a Liberal Party leader, what would you be doing to, mend fences, perhaps, because a lot of them have been, broken down?
For sure, absolutely.
The bridges have been destroyed on some levels.
I totally agree there. And if I could just maybe think about it from a more specific example, as it relates to the educational institution of the English-speaking community, the English-speaking community should be able to manage its own institution without any interference from the Quebec government, period. From my perspective, that's non-negotiable. I think English-speaking Quebecers, I believe English-speaking Quebecers should have the right to receive health services in their own language, period. There's no negotiation about that. And I think if I could bring into the Constitution project of Quebec that the Liberal Party and Antoine Dion-Charest has mentioned on your podcast, it enshrines the rights and freedoms of all Quebecers. So that's a good step forward. If we could solidify and secure with a much more solid piece of legislation, as opposed to just a regular law, the rights and freedoms of all Quebecers, then that's the ecosystem that's required in order for the better part of all of us to resurface all over again. That's what the role of the government is. The role of the government is not to pick side. It's definitely not to pick side. The role of the government is to make sure that everybody has a chance to succeed.
The Corner Booth podcast is brought to you in part by the Snowdon Delicatessen, where we are. 75 years in business, the hub of Montreal's greatest smoked meat, plus carnotzel, potato latkes, and the famous Snowdon Deli party sandwiches. That's the Snowdon Delicatessen. Let me ask you about one other thing that will come up, because the differences between the government now and even the provincial Liberals, that I don't think it matters who the candidate is, over immigration. Mm-hmm. This has been an issue that's gone back and forth. It's obviously going to be an issue in the next election. Where do you stand? What needs to be done on immigration as far as you're concerned?
Well, the first thing that we need to do is to grab control back into the field of immigration, because right now, both in Ottawa and in Quebec City, those two levels of government have actually lost control.
But the feds say, we had Mark Miller on the podcast, and the argument has always been Quebec already has more control over immigration than any other Canadian province. How much more do you need?
Well, I'm not talking about the actual levers in terms of being able to decide I'm talking about the actual absolute numbers. So it's 600,000. There's obviously 200,000 of the 600,000 that are from the Ottawa policy, 200,000 that are from the Quebec-based policy, and 2,000 that are les immigrants politiques. How do you say that? They're
refugees.
Refugees, exactly. And so, and that itself is, Quebec is doing more than its fair share for them. But that being said, what we need to do is we need to align immigration in the direction of what we need as a province, as a nation, as Quebec. So we need more doctors, we need more nurses, we need more people helping the folks in the hospital. We need more manpower in the construction industry. So why don't we just align it towards our need, and in function of our capacity to welcome these people with houses and daycare and hospital access and schooling and so forth. So the how do we call it before, the capacité d'accueil?
The
welcoming capacity. It should be part of that calculation as to what the number is, and for sure that's going to be successful, because you know what. Immigration is a long-term investment. I actually have the riding of Ville-LaSalle. In Ville-LaSalle, there's a lot of Italians there. The first generation are still having a hard time speaking either French or English, honestly, but it doesn't matter because their kids are actually fully involved and involved. And so therefore, the second generation, the first generation, you're doing it for the right reason, but the second generation is the payoff, so to speak. So you want the second generation to participate in Quebec's society, to be a full member of the Quebec society, and I don't care what your last name is, as long as you can actually integrate with, and participate in the Quebec society, that's a win. So it's a long-term investment, and as the demographic are showing, we need that.
So go ahead.
So it's interesting because some of that area that you represent federally just went to the Bloc.
That's right.
Does that concern you?
No, it doesn't concern me. I think the vote in LaSalle was not a vote for, I'll be honest, I don't think it's a vote for the Bloc. I think it's a vote against the Liberal Party of Canada. Right. I think that's the outcome that we received.
I was just going to ask, there are other candidates obviously in this race. Yeah. I mentioned a couple. Pablo Rodriguez now is perhaps the most notable. I remember I had talked to Charles Milliard, and then a couple of days later this issue came up about, he suggested any candidate in this race take a loyalty oath to Quebec, and I wonder what your take on that was, because reaction was not necessarily very good. What do you make of that?
I didn't really understand his point about, a loyalty to the Liberal Party of Quebec, but if you put your political hat on, I think what he's trying to say is that people that are coming from other parties are not welcome.
Or from Ottawa.
Or from Ottawa.
As a federal Liberal.
Yeah, as a federal Liberal. Yeah. I think that's what he indirectly meant to say. I don't really care. I think everybody has the right to participate. Again, the idea is this is going to be a debate of ideas as best as possible, and we're going to win with a good debate of ideas. And so if people bring in ideas that just don't resonate with the Liberal Party of Quebec membership, then they're not going to win. It's as simple as that. So we need
I want to touch on one thing, and we've asked, I think, everyone this who's involved provincially. It's all well and good for Anglos who are watching this to say, I like what you're saying, I think this is great, but you can't win an election with only Anglo support, right?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you, actually. That's the biggest challenge is to get Franco. But what was the percentage of Francophones supporting?
Like 6-7%.
7%, I think.
Yeah, it's not a big number for sure. There's no doubt.
So how do you change that?
The road ahead is pretty simple from our perspective. We need to be talking about the issues that the regions, from their perspective, are priorities. So, and I've gone through Abitibi, I've gone to Gaspé, and I'm going back this afternoon to Saguenay, and we're just all over. And I've traveled all across Quebec. And the consensus, everybody wants Quebec to succeed. So everybody wants to have an economy that's going to work for all Quebecers. So that's the concept. And then the way to deliver, is to talk about ideas specifically, as I mentioned before, economy of the future, intellectual property, and so forth, talking about economic development in all regions, But the basis for that to work is that you actually do need to be on the ground. You actually do need to go and shake hands. It's one handshake at a time. You know, you got to go out there and shake hands and kiss babies as opposed to shaking babies and kissing hands. But you need to go out there and do it. And the work, from my perspective, the work is fun. Because that's actually what I like to do a lot, is going out there and listening to what people want. So when you listen to people, and then when you propose ideas that are in sync with what they told you, they're going to say, okay, well, they understand. Okay, maybe we're going to pay more attention to them. And then the stars are somewhat aligned in the sense that the CAC right now is imploding. It's definitely not the party of the regions, no matter what they say. On the ground, I can tell you that's not what people are saying. So this, it's the PQ that's rising as an alternative because they already have a chef.
Right.
I think the Liberal Party of Quebec just needs to get this leadership thing going. Once we have the new chef, then
that raises the other issue, and we've talked about this with other candidates. Why is it taking so long to get a leader for your party? I mean, why wait this? This is the time to act, to really kind of make an impact, and yet it's still a year away from like
9 months. 9 months.
Okay.
Was it a mistake, to Bill's point, to wait this long? You think?
I was an advocate of an earlier raise than a later raise, but the powers that be have decided to go in that direction, and that's fine. I'm going to play with the rules that are given to all of us, and that's okay. I think the objective is to make sure that we get as much media attention as possible because of the debate of ideas. And with the debate of ideas, we're going to be able to connect with Quebecers, and there's going to be that momentum. And at the same time, and I wouldn't have been able to call it the way it's actually materialized, but a year ago the CAC was not as terrible in terms of polling as it is now. So now people are actually looking. So that there's an alternative. There's an alternative mindset, that is being created in the minds of Quebecers. So
which is how the PQ has done so well.
The PQ
because they were there at the right place, at the right time, and all the rest, and you miss that opportunity.
I agree with you. We missed the opportunity there, but I think that I'm going to give it all I got. I mean, I'm going to be out there 7 days a week. I'm going to pound the pavement and make sure that we get the story out there. And, the good thing about a leadership race is you can actually talk about your ideas and what you view are good ideas for the Liberal Party of Quebec. And, hopefully that's going to resonate with the membership. And if I do win, then, it's a clear mandate. Mandate to go out there on the platform at the October 2026 election with a mandate that's going to resemble the platform.
To your point, you said, this knocking on doors and talking to people and on the ground, old school politicking. You've already been doing this. You didn't just start doing this. So I'm curious, what have you been hearing from those doors that you knocked on? What are people saying to you? What are their concerns?
They want the Quebec Liberal Party to literally get out of its comfort zone of Montreal, which is what has been an issue in the sense that our caucus, as you know, is basically, besides André Fortin and Gatineau, we're 514 area code, basically. So we need to go out there and knock on the doors and do spend times on the ground meeting Quebecers everywhere. That's one thing. But the most important variable from everybody is that they want the economy to grow. They want the economy to be prosperous for all. I'll give you one statistic, and that's my economic hat that's going to go on now for a second. But for 5 years, whether you were here in Quebec or out of Quebec, but within Canada, the productivity of this nation has been zero. We haven't had any gain in productivity. That is a threat to our standard of living. So, and the consequences are starting to be felt because everybody is having a hard time going to the groceries and spending that money. Our Canadian dollar is going down. So everything that we import is going to cost us more money. So it's our standard of living that is a threat because of the lack of vision in terms of an economy. So everybody I talk to, they want the economy to work. They want the Liberal Party of Quebec to have that as a central piece of its platform. They want the Liberal Party of Quebec to actually go out of its comfort zone. And a lot of the members are saying, we want to rebuild the Liberal Party of Quebec so we actually have associations in every riding in Quebec. We have, a momentum going in every regions of Quebec and so forth. So it's to rebuild the machine, basically.
You brought up, and I think this is one of those words where 5 years ago we might not have thought of this, that word austerity. This week, the CAC that word is actually being circulated now because we know how deep in debt they are. We know about the deficit. And they're going to have to deal with these issues going forward. There's still not a federal or provincial election for another year and a half or 2 years, right? But when Carlos Leite was finance minister, and I remember covering that budget, him bringing up that word austerity, a lot of people look at that and say that's what brought down the Liberal government. So how do you, on the one hand, look at that economic outlook and say we have to fix this, but on the other hand, not bring up austerity because apparently people hate that word?
Well, I think the way to describe it is to say we want to actually have an optimal management of our public finances. And what I mean by that is that there's two sides to the equation. There's a spending side, and then there's the revenue side. But on the spend side, not having had the time from the tax government's perspective to look at every program to see if they make sense or not, and they've only started to do that on year 6 of their mandate, is crazy. It's crazy. You don't run a business that way. Why do you run a government that way? There's programs out there that should have expired, like a bottle of milk. At that expiry date, you should revisit. Does it make sense at that program or not? So spend your money wisely. Okay? Do not cut where it's going to hurt people, because if it hurts people, it means that the program is actually making sense. But spend your money wisely. So that's the spent side. On the revenue side, that's when we need to actually have a view of economic development for all of the regions of Quebec. So if we actually have an economy that's at the rendezvous, making sure that people have great, amazing jobs everywhere in Quebec, not just in Montreal or in Trois-Rivières or in Bécancour or in Quebec City, but everywhere in the region, in all regions of Quebec, then the revenues are going to grow. So we need to actually, and then the revenues of the government are going to grow. So it's correlated. So we need to actually have that at the right mindset in order for the balance of an equilibrium in terms of making sure our finances are well managed. That's the word. I think austerity is a brand of 2014 and 18. That's now the CAC's brand for now. My view is that we need to well manage our spend and grow the pie.
We have to wrap up. I don't know if it's fair to ask you this or not. I saw a story, I think it might have only been a day or so ago, that this government is spending $2 billion a year in private health care, as opposed to public health care where you have nurses on strike and doctors complaining about salaries. What's your position on that? Should we be doing this? Should we have more or less? What do you think?
The situation is so dire at the moment that, I think we need to think about all options. All options have to be on the table in order to serve the people. I'll just give you the example of the North Shore. I was in Baie-Comeau about 3 weeks ago, and then they were saying to us that the decree that the government has set to kill all private agencies to serve the people in terms of healthcare in Baie-Comeau basically took out 50% of the medical staff, no matter private or public, in the general area. So all of a sudden, it's gone from having to wait 10 hours to 20 hours. It's having to wait 2 weeks as opposed to 1 week. It's having one doctor as opposed to 2 doctors. It's crazy. So they're not planning well. They're not executing well. And that's because they're just concentrating and centralizing all the decision making without having tentacles everywhere in the regions, without having the antennas in the region to understand what's going on. And they wouldn't have made that. I'm sure Christian Dubé wouldn't have made that decision had he would known that would have been the consequences. Right. So somewhere in his business, somewhere in his ministry, the left hand is not talking to the right hand, and unfortunately, that's
in spite of the name recognition of your competitors for the leadership, are you feeling optimistic?
Absolutely. I'm in the business to win. I'm going to go out there and give it all I've got. And again, I'm going to speak about the ideas and speak about the view of where we could take Quebec forward, and making sure that we, as a province, as a nation, we are one. We're going to talk about bringing everybody back together under that one big tent, and make sure we respect the rights and freedoms of everybody. From my perspective, it's non-negotiable, and that's going to be my path forward. And I'm pretty confident.
Fred, I want to thank you so much.
Thank you for your
being
time
here today, and wish you the best of luck.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Good luck. We'll see you again soon on the next edition of the Quarter Booth Podcast. Thanks for watching.